This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Plan Commission meeting. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM. This program was recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television.
I'd like to call the Planning Commission meeting to order and thank all of you for joining us this evening. We appreciate your participation. Before we get started, if you would, please turn your cell phones off or to silent. And then secondly, if you wish to participate or speak in tonight's meeting, if you would, fill out one of the yellow sheets on the back table and then bring it up to Ryan when you come up to speak. And then when you come to the podium, please introduce yourself with your name and your address. And with that, we will get started with agenda item number 1, which is a rezoning and conditional use permit for Quick Trip.
This property is located on the south side of US Highway 12 at North Town Hall Road. Renee drives to the south. It's an aerial photo showing the existing site. It's vacant. There are residents to the south, businesses to the west and to the north. And the preliminary site plan or general development plan for the property, again with US Highway 12, North Town Hall Road, access coming off the county road. The Quick Trip, the diesel fuel island, the truck scale, the truck parking, and buffering proposed then along the south property line. Access off to the county road. This involves a rezoning and general development plan, which is on your screen. Also involves a conditional use permit for what is considered a truck stop. There is a narrative also provided by applicant that is in your packet. If this rezoning is approved, since this is a general development plan, final site plans consistent with this plan would still need Plan Commission approval. The present zoning, a C2P of this property, is defined as a commercial district that is located in relative proximity to residential uses and to major thoroughfares. And this property has existing residential uses to the south and then US Highway 12 to the north. The proposed rezoning to a C3P allows a broader range of uses, including a truck stop by a conditional use permit. This site again is considered a truck stop because of the scale, the pumps island, and the truck parking. We placed in the report the findings for Plan Commission consideration for the rezoning. In review those findings, we would find we're not aware of any change in condition since this property was originally zoned. We are not aware of any precedents that may result in this decision. The ability for the city and other government agencies to provide services to this site is addressed in the attached city engineer's report, as well as any possible environmental impacts. The Plan Commission will need to judge the compatibility of this request, particularly with the existing and planned residential uses to the south. The development plan will bring truck traffic through the site with added noise and other impacts. The site plan addresses these concerns by limiting access to the county road to the west and by providing landscape buffering along the south property line. Condition is recommended that that landscape buffering be enhanced by simply moving this parking to the north. We have received a revised plan from applicant to show how that can be done. You know, have a broader landscaped area here by simply moving that parking lot to the north. And a condition is also recommended on this general development plan that restricts access and not allowing it on Renee Drive nor the future street along the south property line. This request does not affect the development policies of the city, and the comprehensive plan does show this area as being appropriate for commercial development. The conditional use permit for the truck stop allows the Plan Commission to judge the compatibility of the request. Again, we place the zoning provisions for your review in the report, And we would again note the Plan Commission will need to determine the compatibility of the request with surrounding uses, particularly to the south, and consider whether access restrictions and that landscape buffering addresses those concerns. In terms of the general development plan, we did attach the zoning code provisions to your report, and we note the following. There is an existing 50-foot setback along the south side of State Highway 12. We'd recommend that be maintained. It appears the canopy is in that setback and possibly the scale, although the scale, if it's at grade, is not considered a structure. The canopy may need to be shortened. There also appears to be a sign within the setback that would have to be moved. These two curb cuts to the county highway are 40 feet in width and would require Plan Commission approval. We are recommending wider curb cuts because of the anticipated truck traffic. That access is subject to County Highway Department approval. They'll be the ones that will determine whether or not they allow that access and its design. No access again to Renee Drive or that future street is recommended. The signs for these projects must meet C3 district standards, and we believe two signs on the county road may not meet those standards. There is a non-conforming billboard on this site, and we'll review that as per the provisions of the sign code with the final site plan. And again, we attach those provisions in the report. They show an 80-foot easement across the site for an overhead power line. We need to see the language of that easement to show that these improvements underneath it are allowed. The Plan Commission would determine the final design of that landscape buffering with final site plans, and all other aspects would also then be reviewed with the final site plan for the project. We did attach the city engineer's report on city services to the project. The Plan Commission determines compliance with the various sections of city code. We would recommend the following conditions: access being prohibited to Renee Drive and the future street along the south property line. Move that truck parking area to the north, which they have shown now on a revised site plan. Plan Commission will review that landscaping buffering with the final site plans. Maintain that 50-foot setback along the north property line, and any structures within that setback would need to be removed. Site access will be reviewed by the Plan Commission with final site plans and will require the County Department, Highway Department approval also. Signs must meet C3 district standards and are reviewed with permits, meaning one of these signs may not be allowed. The non-conforming billboard will be reviewed with the final site plans. Again, we attach the provisions of the sign code to the report. We need a copy of that 80-foot wide power line easement. The design of that buffering along the south property line will be determined by Plan Commission with final site plans, and all other aspects will be reviewed by Plan Commission with the final site plan. Compliance with the recommendations in the city engineer's report, which is attached, and on page 9, adds 5 more conditions. A development agreement for the construction of the street along the south property line. Stormwater runoff be reviewed. Plan Commission approval of those 40-foot wide curb cuts to the county road. Provide a traffic impact analysis for this project, and then enter into a development agreement for the funding of any traffic capacity improvements identified as necessary by that traffic impact analysis. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Any questions for Darrell? Commissioner Mitchell.
So just to be clear, if it was just a quick trip without the truck stop, then the C2 zoning would be appropriate.
Correct.
Okay, so it's being rezoned to C3 and then conditional use.
Correct.
Any other questions? Commissioner Peterson.
Does the landscaping buffer indicate any noise abatement between them and the properties to the south?
It does not indicate it on the plan that's before you.
Okay,
It could be provided or required by the plan.
Trees will not provide that sound.
So we could recommend?
You can add that as a condition, yes, if you feel noise abatement.
The 50-foot setback, is that consistent all the way up?
A 50-foot setback is a standard setback along a state right-of-way, yes.
Any other questions? I guess that's it. Thank you. Is the applicant here?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission.
Good evening.
My name is Scott Tigan. I'm Vice President with the Quick Trip Stores. It's been a while since I've been here, and it's good to be back. The site plan, I'll address the last point that came up here. We do plan to put a privacy fence and significant landscaping along the whole entire south. When we developed this plan, we were keeping the neighbors in mind as best we could. We didn't ask for any access on the south side anywhere there. The way the land lays there, it sits down a little bit, and we've even talked, excuse me, of putting a little berm along there and putting a fence on top of the berm. And I think that we can be good neighbors here with our neighbors. And I know Kathy's comment was that what she's thinking here is, let's just let Quick Trip be. We can't make it here without trucks. It's just a little too rural. It'll be a very successful site with this, but without the trucks, we can't go here. So not only are we servicing trucks, but we plan to service the neighbors as well too. And to service them and keep them happy, we have to keep them happy. So they'll be our customers. And that's number one for us. We talked about the fence and the landscaping. We have talked with the county about the accesses. The northerly access will be a right out only. So people will come in and everybody will come in the south access, and I'm sure everybody will go out the other one, except for the neighbors, and they'll come back out where they came in. We're clearly going to do a traffic study, and I'm sure this traffic study is going to say put lights in there, and we're willing to pay our fair share of the cost of the lights as well, whatever fare is. I say 25%, but somebody else might say more than that. I say 25 because there's four corners and we should each pay our fair share. But I'm on record for 25%, and I could probably pay more. And we agree to all the conditions that are in the report. I'm here to answer any questions. I don't have to give you the whole Quick Trip spiel. The one thing I will tell you is one of the national convenience store magazines does a surprise check at maybe the top 10 or 12 convenience store companies in the country, and Quick Trip has won that 5 of the last 8 years, and the other 3 we got second. So we're very proud of that. Forbes put us listed us as number 30 in the best place to work, and that totally unsolicited by us. We had no clue that was going to be in there, and it showed up, and we're very proud of that. We take care of our coworkers take care of our customers. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the Commissioner Larson?
Thank you. As part of your market analysis, whatever processes you went through to decide this is where you want to build a truck stop, did you look at how many existing trucks, what's the truck traffic existing in that neighborhood right now?
Well, it's kind of hard to quantify that. It's one of those things that you have here. You can see the trucks at 2 of the competitors there, and so you judge it a lot by that. And it is on 94. We've got a little bit of hole on 94 from our Wilson truck stop, well, at Menominee and exit 45, and then the next really closest one would be clear to Black River. So there's a little bit of hole there, and we have a lot of requests by trucks, and we'd also like to service Menards there too. So, but a lot of it's here.
Any other questions? Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Tegan, am I correct that 0.2 of a mile down towards the interstate, there's a existing filling station convenience store on both sides of that, of 312, correct?
Back to the west.
Yeah, towards the interstate.
2 Holidays.
Yeah, and one of those is currently a truck stop as well, correct?
I'd say they probably both are, because
Okay.
the Holiday on the
Okay.
south has about the same amount of parking as we do here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just curious, is there this overwhelming demand here in Eau Claire for another
See, in
convenience
my
store,
book,
and I recognize the competitive situation, but,
yeah, we're highly competitive.
yeah, I know.
Will we put either one of them out of business? No, we won't put either one of them out of business. In my mind, I don't really even consider this a truck stop. I consider it a convenience store with some emphasis on trucking, but a truck stop to me has at least 100 truck parking lots, and that's not what we're doing here.
Pretty sure the folks in the residence are gonna consider it a truck stop, but anyway, we'll save that for the public hearing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Peterson?
What's your opinion on having the gas pumps almost underneath the power lines?
It's not a problem, just so we're not underneath them. It's really not an issue at all.
Until the storm comes?
Takes the lines down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's happened out here before, with the power lines going down.
You know, we've been that close to power lines at several facilities and we haven't had a problem. I mean, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but we haven't had the problem in the past.
Any other questions for the applicant? We appreciate you coming in.
Yep, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Good evening.
Hello, my name is Joe Miller. I'm with Westridge Village. We currently rent to 140 families just south of this site here and to the east of the site.
Do you want to just take that aerial map right to your right there?
Oh, sorry.
Not that one. The one
Right
right there,
here?
yep, and just set that underneath there.
So these properties down here to the south and over here to the east, it's about 140 families you rent to altogether. So I felt it was important tonight to come and speak in favor of this proposal by Quick Trip. We feel it'll be a really good thing for the residents in this area. What Quick Trip is able to do is they're able to, offer low price groceries, number one, to a close proximity to these residents. A lot of these residents are just hardworking blue collar residents that are living paycheck to paycheck. So we feel this will really help them out, being close. I don't really have too much to say, but I just wanted to come and voice our approval of this proposal.
Sure. Any questions for Mr. Miller? We appreciate you coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, close the public hearing portion of the meeting. I'm looking for a motion to approve both for recommendation, both the rezoning and the conditional use permit.
I'll move approval with the staff recommendations.
We have a motion with staff recommendations. Is there a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Peterson?
I'm gonna vote against it. I just don't think there's any way they can abate the noise that comes in there unless they put up full 15, 20-foot noise walls. A wood fence and trees is not gonna do it. And you're gonna have trucks sitting out there in that parking lot with their engines running, possibly refrigeration units running, and it's gonna permeate the neighborhood.
Any other comments or discussion? Commissioner Brenholm?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I agree with Commissioner Peterson. I think there's going to be a lot of noise, and having driven through that area this afternoon, it's close to a lot of residences. So I'm going to vote no as well.
Any other comments? I guess I'd like to entertain the recommendation of, if depending on where we go with it, that it specifically state not just the fencing, but a berm of some sort. Again, just because it is a lower area, and if we can raise that and make that a recommendation as part of this proposal, then I guess I'd like to bring that up. That would be an amendment?
I'll make that amendment. I think the berm would, or I'll move that amendment. I think the berm would help with noise, but, as I think about what's already in that neighborhood, we've got a distribution center across the street with lots and lots of truck traffic. At least one, possibly two truck stops, depending on how you count them, I guess, already in the neighborhood. And a truck dealership, I think, or a repair shop and a wrecker service. And I think that there are already a lot of sources for the sounds that we want to avoid with this truck stop. And so it seems like a good marketing location anyway for a truck stop. And so, but I will make that amendment.
I guess as a second, I'd support the change. I'd also add, Eric, the amount of traffic that comes all night long on that road is just continuous, and it's pretty loud already.
So we have a motion and a second to the amendment? Is that correct? Any discussion in regards to the amendment, and I guess recommending there be, do we need to be specific with the berming, or is that something that the staff will?
I added to condition 2 on page 5, where it says move the truck parking lot north. Plan Commission approval of the buffer plan is required with final site plans. I added include a berm for noise barrier for this area. That's the language that would work.
Berm and fence, or do we?
Fence is a buffer in my mind, but we can say fence also. It's implied. A berm is, the noise barrier is the term I think is not implied by a buffer. So.
Okay. Commissioner Peterson.
It's probably going to take more than a berm and just a wood fence to negate the increase in noise with the trucks that close. It's probably going to be something substantial, concrete noise wall probably, to keep it to the ambient level, even with the traffic out on 312.
Any other discussion in regards to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the addition to the buffering signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Amendment is passed. In regards to the rezoning and conditional use, again, we have a motion and a second. Now with the amendment, any other further discussion in that regard? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion is passed. Agenda item number 2. Again, a public hearing for final action, a conditional use permit for tavern at 1004 Menominee Street.
This property is located at Menominee, where it bends and becomes Water Street and 10th. There's residence across the road to the east. The rest has the apartment across the road to the north. The rest of the area has various public, industrial, or commercial zoning. That's correct. Aerial photo, though, then showing the property. Residence, commercial, apartment, commercial, industrial, Hobbs. It's a revised floor plan that was placed in your packet. Handicap ramp up to the south entrance, interior layout within the building, a patio area then added to the west. The old floor plan was also kept in your packet. And then the site plan shows the existing building and the existing parking lot to the south of the property. The Plan Commission voted to reconsider this application and establish a new public hearing. We attached the original conditional use staff report and the original rezoning and site plan staff report in your packet. We also attached an email we received from applicant and then this revised floor plan for the project. The email describes the proposed operation of the pub and the food menu. It notes the kitchen location may be moved to the basement if realistic. Right now it's shown on the main floor. It notes the revised hours of operation when compared to the original proposal. The revised floor plan for the facility notes a more open floor plan with an outdoor patio then to the west. The required parking for this revised floor plan is only 10 stalls based on seating capacity, and then 14 stalls based on the square footage of the building. And the applicant does have an agreement with the city to use that existing parking lot to the south, which is a 20-stall parking lot, and we attached that agreement. There is no parking requirement for outdoor patio seating simply because it's seasonal in nature. We did attach a letter from Jeremy Gregert that was distributed to the Plan Commission at its last meeting, and we simply wanted to note that it is correct in that this property is not located within the Water Street Commercial District Plan, which does have policy restricting new taverns. And the zoning for the 200 to 500 block of Water Street actually prohibits new taverns, and this project is not located within those areas. The original staff report also notes application was reviewed by Landmarks Commission and was supported. And the original staff report also contains a letter from the Randall Park Neighborhood Association in support. Plan Commission should review this application as per the provisions of City Code, which we did attach and are in the original staff report. The letter to applicant approved by the Plan Commission with the original site plan for the property is also attached, and those conditions would remain applicable to this request if approved by Plan Commission. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Darrell? Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. Darrell, in this revised site plan, how would you estimate the seating inside?
I just counted, is basically what I did. I got
And
it
what
at
did you
about
get?
30 is what I got. In this case, if it becomes the lesser than the square footage, which is 1 stall per 100 square feet, we use the more restrictive and say the required parking for this is 14 stalls based on square footage of the building.
May I ask a
Certainly.
couple more? So there's a lot of open space then. What would you say the maximum capacity of the building would be?
Again, the maximum capacity is established by building code, which can be set based on square footage, ventilation, bathrooms, access. Whichever is the most restrictive of those is what's going to set the capacity of this based on building code. When we look at it from a parking requirement, we just measure square footage and say 1 stall per 100 square feet.
I'm really not asking about parking, so
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The capacity is going to depend on one of the lesser of those things: access, bathrooms, ventilation. Our architect might come up with a few more, but it's all those standards, and whichever is the most restrictive, that sets the capacity of the building.
And then one more, and then I have some more, but I'll let others
Sure.
go in. In the email from applicant, he says hours of operation would be roughly.
Yes,
Can we nail that down to take that word roughly out?
you can as a condition of approval, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Darrell? Go
I
ahead.
have another question. So you mentioned in the staff report that the letter in the original application contains the conditions
Yes.
under which the permit would be given. Do those conditions also then include the hours of operation, the amount of seating, the fact that food will be served? Are those also conditions of this permit?
They're not conditions, but they are the application. That is, when we issue the permit, we basically reference the application states as per the attached letter. Again, if you want to not nail those down in terms of hours of operation will be instead of roughly, then you'd have to make that as a condition. In terms of the floor plan, the seating capacity, if they substantially change, we say that's a substantive change. We go back to Plan Commission. They have noted they may move this kitchen to the basement, in which case they would replace that with a seating similar to this. They've noted that in their application that might happen. They haven't determined the feasibility of placing that kitchen in the basement at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Daryl? So, back to a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the old Seahorse. Again, same situation here with the pavilion. We're not counting any of the seating outside in relations to bathrooms or parking or
Correct.
anything.
Correct. This is outdoor seating, so it doesn't count towards your parking requirement. The difference with the Seahorse was it actually came in as a building when they made the final submittal. So,
Right, but it was still the question of, okay, we don't count them because it's a pavilion, or we don't count them because they're outdoors, but it's still 48 people that have to go to the bathroom and park somewhere.
that's the way it works because it's seasonal nature.
So looking at the interior layout, it really doesn't have the feel of a restaurant inside without the tables. I know it's a tavern,
I
but sure. Any other questions? All right, I guess that's it. Is the applicant here? Good evening.
Good evening. First of all, thank you for letting me come back and try to explain. There's a lot of questions. I'm going to start out by just giving you a little history on what's happened with this building over the last 2 years, and whatever questions may come at the end, please feel free to ask me. But 2 years ago, we started this process, and I was the first one that I will come to the table and say that I was the first one to say that this building needs to go. It's a lot easier for me to start from scratch with everything that's been asked of me with a historic stamp. It's very complicated, and there's a lot of issues out there. Parking, with a historic building, I can't just blow at a wall. So over the last 18 months, I've worked with the historic committee to try to find ways to find alternative uses for this building, and that's why I'm sitting here right now with asking for a conditional use, because ultimately we've chopped this up a half a dozen ways with architects, professionals giving me advice, and fortunately it just doesn't work for a restaurant platform. That being said, a lot of those issues are because I can't blow at a wall. I can't make a larger dining area. So with that 18 months, my outlook on this has changed a lot from the fact that building a new building versus the existing building, I can't replace that piece of history in Eau Claire. I can't do that. And I think we've got a good use of this building, but we have to wrap our heads around the fact that we're dealing with two words here: restaurant versus tavern. Unfortunately, the tavern word is very controversial, and I think that's what I'm going to try to express to you folks, is how I'm going to change the vision of what a tavern is considered in Eau Claire. Some of the issues as far as why I came back and asked for this is the major one is parking. I have very limited parking with this building, and being able to change the floor and the layout of this building under a tavern coding or licensing would allow me to be able to pull, I guess, not have traditional seating where you have four tops in a restaurant, and take and utilize more space in that, 12 to 1,400 square feet. That's what I'm dealing with. It's not a lot of area. And so utilizing the wall space to extend a bar type seating that might mimic what my bar is. Being flexible with the fact that how do we utilize the upstairs and the downstairs of this building. The basement, I have spoke with my architects, and I spoke with the health department, had them come out. They did give me the health department gave me very positive feedback on the fact that they thought the basement could be utilized as a kitchen. Architects had contradicting information, so I don't know where that stands. But it is a possibility which would allow me to have more seating. As far as giving you a definite amount of, patron that I would be able to have in this building, as far as a count, realistically, I mean, the golden number that we always tried to shoot for was 75 to 85 people. Is that doable? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you get to 85 people in there, it gets pretty tight. So I guess ultimately when we find out some of those answers about where that kitchen is going to be placed, then we can work back and say, how do we get the maximum seating capacity in here? As far as going back to the layout on the restaurant versus tavern thing and seating, if I put 4 tops in there, it's pretty obvious to see that I'm probably maybe going to get 10 tables in there. If I do unique seating where I utilize the wall space and I have, if it's bar chairs or whatever it is that I can pull out as hours of operation increase and get busier, that I can move some of that into a storage area, it's going to allow for more of a standing area around, per se, like maybe it's a cocktail table in the middle, maybe it's nothing. I guess that's kind of the feel that we're trying to go here. The titling that I told you in my email, as far as a gastropub, the focus on a gastropub is to have a little more upscale food, but an environment that is family friendly. A gastropub is not something that you have pool tables, you have dartboards around, which is a traditional tavern. So I really am trying to focus and massage that. What I can tell you, and I can sit here and express this, is the taverns down the road that I'm being classified against. I would say that my focus is not to have 2-for-1 beer specials. My focus is not to have Budweiser neons in my window saying, come and drink as much as you can. My focus is to address the community that my family knows best, and that's essentially the hockey community that's right across the street. Majority of those people coming in have children. We want to be able to offer them a place that they feel comfortable bringing their families into. If it's, in between a game, during a tournament, people coming in from out of town, that I know what that demand is, and I guess that's my focal point. Now everything that comes around that is, people coming off the bike trails, people coming from Carson Park. I guess I'd like to expand that out, but right now the target audience that I know, I don't know too many parents that want to take their children into an environment where there's binge drinking or whatever it may be going on, and that's not what we're trying to do here. The other part about it is, my family, as a third generation in a family business, we've always been very focused on improving that neighborhood. And, the property that we do have there, we always try to be good neighbors. And the last thing we want to do is bring a new business in that's going to go against that vision. So I think that this is a great opportunity to change what has been the norm of a tavern in Eau Claire, and really I'm asking you folks for an opportunity to do that.
Any questions for the applicant? Mr. Peterson.
One thing I noticed in your email to Mr. Tufty is that it says menu will consist of blah, 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 with soups and sandwiches during lunch and dinner hours. So in between those times, between lunch and dinner and after dinner, food will not be available?
That is not the case. My menu, I would say ideally, once I'm able to dial down what I am doing, what space I have to work with in a kitchen, I would be serving food essentially from 11 to 11. I mean, I look at, if somebody comes in at 9:30 after a hockey game and, a group of coaches come in and they want to have some burgers, I don't want to say no to them and turn them away. I mean, that's my target audience there. I'd like to say, yeah, what do you want? I mean, am I going to be serving food after midnight? I don't know how many people are going to be coming in to eat then, but I would say midnight would be a good cutoff point.
Okay.
Any other questions? Just a couple, getting back to the floor plan again, family focus and family friendly, but where does a family sit? And, I mean, where do the kids and their mom and their parents sit in there, to eat or to be together, or to enjoy the establishment? Obviously, in the summertime, there's seating outside, but hockey is a fall and winter and spring sport, so where are the families going to be able to do that?
Well, first of all, I mean, in the layout, this is just a rough layout. We want to incorporate some corner booths, use the corners. So that would be a great way to have families, 8 to 10 is what things that we're looking at, where I can utilize them. That back corner, I guess the southeast corner, which is questionable for the kitchen, would be a great place that I can put booths in. As far as being able to accommodate to families and stuff like that, I mean, I haven't even got to the point where how do I utilize my upstairs? My upstairs, I mean, we have thoughts about taking the upstairs area and turning it into a banquet room or a private room so that when teams come over, they can have a designated area. But, I mean, we're far away from that at this point.
The second story you're talking about?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Which is not utilized space right now.
Again, I want to see it look, the thing we have to think about and look at is we're allowing this conditional use, not just for you, but for the building. So let's say the next person comes in.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a next person, I mean, I hope you're there forever. But that isn't always the case. And so we have to think, what will the next person do, and what restrictions do we need to think about in that regard so that it doesn't become, the 2-for-1s and, the all-night drinking and $5 for all you can drink and things like that. So, those questions are looking at today and also looking at the future too. But I guess when I first saw it, I had concerns if we're going to try and maximize the food and maximize the family and maximize the location to Hobbs, which is a family experience. I didn't see how that would work with what you have there, but that was my concern.
Terry, can I address your question?
Certainly, yeah.
So basically what I'm hearing from you is, down the road, these are my intentions, but you're worried about what happens down the road. Well, down the road, someone's going to have to do the same process that I am if I ever were to sell this. They're going to have to come back in here. I can't just churn over a license to them. They're going to have to come back in here and they're going to have to apply for that.
Well, the conditional use would stay with the building.
I understand that, but as far as getting a liquor license, they would still have to apply for that.
Well, sure, but just like anybody, you can apply for it, get approved, and then at a later date, come in and maybe not be a responsible server, too.
I understand that, but realistically, the best way I can answer that question is, this family's been this property's been in my family for roughly 25 years. We're not doing this to look and turn around and dump it or sell it to somebody else. I mean, it's something we're expanding what we do, and it's something that the family's been passionate about for a while. So I think the better question would be that if that got to that point, it would probably be a family member of mine that would take it over instead of selling it to the open market with the same vision that I have.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Are you still undecided about where the kitchen's going to go?
I am getting contradicting information from two parties, so until I can get those two parties to give me a definite answer, yes, I am.
Sure.
If the kitchen were to go in the basement, then you still don't have enough room to have a restaurant?
Well, that goes back to the parking issue, and the answer would be no, because I cannot meet those requirements for the space that I would need. If I go under a restaurant licensing, I need to have that much more parking, so it doesn't help me. I mean, that's the whole purpose that we're here. The classification for a restaurant versus a tavern changes. I mean, my parking just by this platform has dropped from 10 to 14 spots. Before, I was sitting at 27.
Any other questions? Mr. Peterson.
Getting back to, I think where Mr. Weld is going, when I look at this, I see the bar, the regular bar, and I see the seating along the side, which is to me a bar without a bartender behind it. When I've been in Ray's place at Ninth and Water, and there's been hockey tournaments going on, families come in there. They have 4 tables and the big high table.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see the kids and their families sitting at bars, so I don't see this necessarily as conducive to that family-friendly atmosphere.
Well, I mean, I also, if you want to use Ray's as an example, they have the long tables that sit off, that are off the wall, that have 6 to 8 seats around them.
Yep.
And I've seen plenty of families sitting on those, along with the other 4-tops. I'm not saying that I'm not going to utilize a 4-top. A good example is you asked me about lunch. Maybe at lunch, I mean, I'm not going to have as busy of an area. I do have 4-tops out. But when it gets to dinner hours and more people are coming in there, I need to be flexible on my seating. As I said before, you asked me about booths. Well, I'm going to try to find a way to incorporate booths in here. I just don't know. Do I have a corner to use on the southeast side? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. I'm not intending to wrap bar seating all the way around. I might put, I might put a long rail in front of a couple windows and then put a booth there, and then run another long rail and put a booth there.
But this is showing that long seating on the west wall, which is tantamount to.
I can't even put that long seating on the west wall because, number one, there's a stairwell there. It's merely a drawing to let you know that I'm using an open platform.
There's a stairwell between the deck.
There's a stairwell that would be right here. So I mean, there's windows that would be all the way out here. So number one, the proposed bathrooms are there. So, I mean, this would be an area that there's a stairwell right there. So right now, the way the building sits, I couldn't even do that. So
This
maybe
isn't really the plan that you're going to be having.
this is a plan so you understand that I'm using an open floor space. That's the purpose of this plan. I couldn't tell you, I mean, we're at the point that I couldn't tell you that this plan could stick because I don't know if I'm going to have 2 stairwells in that basement or that building. And I won't know that until I go to the next step. So, I mean, when you ask me that, I mean, this is just merely to say that I need to be able to utilize and maximize the space. I mean, could I take this spot right here and put a booth right here? Could I put a booth right here? Sure. Could I put a booth back in this corner, and this corner? Sure. I just don't know if the kitchen's going to go there.
Mr. Pearson?
I'm just thinking you just mentioned a booth on the west wall.
Mhm.
And to me, that if you're looking at family friendly, that would be more conducive to family friendly than rows of seating with people facing the wall. That to me is more just sitting there having drinks.
To be honest with you, truthfully, where I'd like to see this, this type of seating right here that you're looking at is on this wall so people can look out the windows. So on this side. So if that's something that you're asking me to accommodate with, maybe I do it not a traditional booth, but I run 1, 2, 3 long tables that families of 8 to 10. That's something that I could easily incorporate in.
But to me, you're talking family conducive, and you're showing something to me that isn't family conducive, and there's a dichotomy there.
Well, I mean, I think that I could go back to you, and my old plan is not going to be the plan that I'm going to follow. So merely I was asked to present something on the lines of what I'm going to do. I don't know that the bathrooms are going to be in that spot right there. The bathrooms might be in that corner. I mean, so I think what you're asking me is something that for me to get to that step, I need to get past this step. So I think it'd be very easy for you guys to say, why don't you come back with your final drawing when I know that? And if that's what you're asking me to do, I'm saying I'm willing to work with you, and those are the requests that you're asking me. But I mean, I could take this whole thing and spin it around and come back and say, well, this is what we have to do. I mean, it goes back to how I open this up. I have a historic building that I have to work with inside. I mean, I might think that this is the greatest place to put my bathrooms, and I get my contractors in there and say, James, we can't do that. We need to put them over here because I don't know what I'm going to find.
Okay, and if we're looking at a conditional use permit, to me, you're talking one thing and showing another. So if you want to revamp your plans to present what you were presenting to us tonight in a little more detail, I think I can make a better decision on that rather than something that this is what you're showing us, but it may not be what you're going to do in there. And can you see where I'm coming from?
I can understand where you're coming from, but I guess my response to you would be that, as I said, I have chopped this building up 6 other times, and I started out, and I mean, in all due respect, I mean, there gets to a point where I've got 10 plans that I've already put in front of the city. If you're asking me to accommodate more booth seating, I don't think that that's something that needs to be, I need to come back with another plan, because either way, before I can move forward with this, I have to present my final plans to the Landmark Commission anyways. So I think it'd be easier to say, well, we'd like to see this in there, so when you come back with your final plans, this is something that is a requirement that we're asking with this conditional use permit. But if you're asking me to stall this another, 60 days or 30 days, no, I'm not. I'm not in that position. I've waited 2.5 years for this.
I guess what I'm asking for is just that your presentation matches up with what's being shown on the plan. And to me, you're talking one thing and what's being shown is a little bit different, so.
I understand that, and I can't, what I can't tell you is I have the confines of a building that the layout is very challenging on it, and I've expressed that. I can tell you what I think I could do, and I could have to come back and say this just isn't going to work. So, I think what you're asking me to do, I gladly would like to do it. I just can't tell you that I'm going to be able to do that until I get to that point.
Okay.
Not that I'm fighting you, just that I'm just saying there's some challenges. I'm fully responsive to that, what you're asking, and I can make that work. But for me to come and say this is the exact plan, I don't know that you can enter into something like that.
Maybe you should talk with your architects a little bit more, and maybe the city county health department a little bit more, and see what is feasible in there, and then come back and present that.
And I can answer that question. Their answer to me is we've done everything we can. That is that answer. You're basically you're kind of putting me in a position where I'm saying what you're asking me to do. And this is the answer that I've been given from the architects is I can do everything you're asking me to do. It's just unfortunately not in this building. It's a clean slate. That's the reality of the matter. And
Commissioner Granlund.
I think it's fairly reasonable to demonstrate what your plan would be with what I would call the worst case scenario, what you'd need to do to pack the people in. And it's still a fairly small number of total people when you get to that point that you can actually fit standing shoulder to shoulder in there. The toilets appear to be about adequate for standing room only, and it fits that number you had, what was it, roughly 80 people, 75, 85 people total. And on a typical, I can't imagine really that many times you'd approach that total, since most people would rather, if they're going to eat a sandwich, have more table space in front of them to do it. You're probably more likely to have a lower number where you'll have the tables out more of the time. But I think it's worthwhile here when we're trying to balance the parking issues and the site issues and the building use, that you are showing essentially the maximum capacity is that standing room only, and it's still a fairly small number for a pub or a bar situation that I can see. I think it seems like a very reasonable way to present, as I say, the worst case scenario, and if it still fits within the allowable area, I think the worst is not all that bad.
Any other questions? Commissioner Ebert.
I have a question, but I'm not sure it's for James. The question I have is who ultimately makes the decision on what the maximum capacity in the building is?
That's the building inspectors.
The building inspectors.
Yes.
And at what point do they make that determination?
With the building plans when they're submitted.
Okay. So at this point, the 75 or 80 people that's maximum there, we're basing the number of parking spaces off of the square footage of the building, correct?
Correct.
And the correct number of spaces for that is how many?
14. It's a 1,400 square foot
Okay.
building.
And we've got 14 spaces.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I guess that's it for now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Helene Smyer. I live at 320 Broadway Street, and I'm still president of the association. James basically gave the same presentation to our meeting last Thursday that you heard this evening, but without this picture, without those plans. But what appealed to us, those of us on the committee, were the following things. His business plan that includes no 2-for-1 drink special, no late-night cheap drinks, no neon signs, no games, no things that are competitive and create, conflicts for people who drink. The good food was appealing, showcasing, he told us he would showcase local specialties, restoring the interior, of course, exposing the brick, hanging historic pictures down the road. We could all picture a respectable, family-oriented, small pub. James and his family have been in business in our neighborhood for over 30 years, as he said. That's a plus for us. He has no idea of jeopardizing the family's good name. With the strong ties to the hockey community, the location is good. He would get people off the bike trail, people coming from Carson Park, possibly the new development further west. And then his willingness to adjust the hours, we thought, went to his intent to not become a designation for late-night drinking. He doesn't want that, and we certainly have to hope that he proves it. Finally, it is consistent with our neighborhood plan to support family-friendly businesses in the neighborhood. The fact that this one includes a liquor license shouldn't really overshadow his intent to provide food. He just may not provide as much food as a restaurant requires. And so, with all those ideas, after a lengthy discussion, we sent James away and then we discussed it, and a motion was made to support James' plan to preserve and repurpose the Kaiser Lumber Building as a family-friendly pub, as was presented at our meeting. It passed unanimously. There were 20 neighbors present, 13 of whom were voting members. So that's where we stand, and if you have any questions, if I was not clear enough, I welcome your questions.
Any questions for Helene? There was some, when it was first proposed, and we appreciated your support and obviously the time that you put into that. Where it was conflicting for us was that, for many years, you've said just the opposite. You don't want any more bars and opportunities for what you felt been a difficult experience in the Randall Park area. So when we first saw that you were in support of it, that was where it was a little confusing, I guess, for us. But I understand what you're stating and the fact that it is a family business. It is a building that we want to save, but we're kind of going against what we've been hearing from you for lots of years. So,
well, if I could answer that, this location is away from. It's further down even than Ray's, and I did speak with our local district commander. I think I can't think of his name right now, and he said they never have calls at Ray's. Students don't go down there. James's intent is not to lure students down there. I think our problem bars are on Water Street. This is obviously Menominee Street. Mm-hmm. But, we do support, hard as it may be to believe, we do support our local, our other local
right.
Neighborhood bars, and we view this as more of a neighborhood, not the type that the people would spill out into the neighborhood and be traveling down the streets hooting and hollering. They'll probably all be in cars for one, but we see a difference.
Okay.
But I understand your question, and we did discuss that. That was part of the discussion, quite frankly, a big part of it.
Right.
So I hope that answers your question.
No, perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Eileen?
Thank
Thank you
you.
for coming up. Anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
Well,
Good
good evening. My name is Jane Plummer, and I live at East 2081 Cedar Road, which is not inside the city limits, but I have a very emotional and personal connection to this building because my great-grandfather was John H. Kaiser. And I have a tour business that I've had for the last 22 years, taken many bus tours past this building and done historical tours of Eau Claire. If you remember when it was called the River Song, we would stop after the historical tour and do some shopping. And again, my great-grandfather was one of the original lumber barons. We had 39 of them here in Eau Claire. And I think it's absolutely fabulous that they're going to preserve the integrity of the building and to keep it as a historic pub. I know I would, and friends of mine and other family members too that are Kaisers in the area really embrace the idea of making it to a historic pub. And I still do bus tours, so who knows, maybe someday I'll bring my buses there as well. So I just wanted to say I support it even though I'm out of the city limits, but and would love to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? Commissioner Mitchell.
You don't have to be in the city limits to speak, so we're happy to have you.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks for coming up.
Of course.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
Hello, my name is Patrick Rolbecki. I am James's uncle, and I've been working with James more on a consulting level as a family member. He has been struggling with this project for quite some time. I see there's Mr. Peterson had some questions for James that, quite frankly, I can see the frustration in James and his aggravation and the process that he's going through with all the different aspects that he's working within here. The way I view it, and I can't speak because James has done the detail work on this. I have been sitting in the wings, and he's been bouncing ideas off of me. We've been working together and collaborating on this, trying to make this work. The way I understand it, when you go into Eau Claire, in the city of Eau Claire, you have the opportunity to be able to apply for a tavern license, or you have the opportunity to apply for a restaurant license. A restaurant license, you're beholding to certain standards and certain requirements required parking standards and or also percentage of food standards and everything else that's related to it. James looked at the building, talked to the people that are professionals. He's paid a lot of people to run studies on this, and he's came up with a restaurant is not going to work there based on the requirements and the parameters both related to parking and or also to your serving requirements. But a tavern will work there. But we don't have the opportunity to be able to say we want to make it a brew pub, we want to make it a gastro pub, we want to make it into something else. We don't have that opportunity, so it gets labeled with this tavern label. This is basically the intent of the operation is basically as a restaurant operation, but operating under a pretense of a tavern setting. I don't know how much more he can work with. The questions that you were bantering back and forth, basically he has been asked to come up with the presentation, this presentation that's sitting up here right now. That is not his final floor plan, but he can't give you guys a final floor plan on the basis until he's approved for this consideration of this zoning request that he's putting in. Once he has that in place, obviously it's Daryl's job and the City of Eau Claire's planning department to be able to work with him and get that coordinated. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the job today at hand, or the question at hand, is can we approve James in consideration for this under a tavern license, not debating whether or not we have enough booth space or enough seating space. That's the requirement of the city, to hold him and make him be held accountable to whatever the requirements would be, and or any regulations or any kind of amendment that you guys would maybe attach to it. If I'm not mistaken, that you have that capacity or ability to be able to do that too. I don't know, is there anything else that we should have been questioning on? That's, it's been a very long road. We want to be very good neighbors to the neighborhood. We own a number of properties. When I say we as a family own a number of properties in that neighborhood. I think you'll definitely see that our goal is to present well, represent our family name very well, represent the city of Eau Claire very well, and be very respectful and very accountable to what we commit to doing.
Any questions? I think just to clarify, some of the questions that were asked, because part of the application process, as far as we're putting a bar in an area that didn't, that requires, because of where it's going to be and what the building is, it's going to require the conditional use permit. And part of his application and part of the email that he sent, it describes it as one thing, but the pictures say another, as Mr. Peterson was saying. And so that's why, with the conditional use permit, the more that we can have in front of us, the more we know about what this is going to be and how it's going to look, the easier it is for us to look at this and say, this makes sense, this looks like it'll work, we think this will, be a great, addition to the neighborhood, and so on and so on. So, with that, normally we would see a little more specific detail as to, that supports what's written here. And so that's why I think there was the question, because that shows a different picture from, what was put into the email. But I think, yes, we want to determine, is it going to be a tavern or is it going to be a restaurant or what? And I understand that you want to be able to plan and prepare and have an architect lay it out for one or the other. Mm-hmm. And that will make it a lot easier for you.
Yep.
But, right, just to clarify, we're not trying to be difficult. We're not trying to draw this out any longer. We want to issue a conditional use permit and have all the information that we need in front of us. And it isn't as clear as it should be, or we would like it to be, I guess. So.
Okay.
Any other questions? Commissioner Peters.
I just have a comment. If he'd have shown 4 tops instead of the 13 individual seats along the wall, I wouldn't have had my questions.
Okay.
Because the 4 tops to me is family friendly.
I think what
But normally families don't sit along a wall facing the wall in a restaurant, bar, bistro, or whatever. So it's just the depiction, and that's what I was getting after.
Okay, but I mean, throw that into your requirement.
You've convinced me that he is indeed a sincere young man.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Great, thanks for coming up.
Thank you.
Anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Good
Eric
evening.
Larson, 128 East Grant, and I've decided to recuse myself from this, obviously, because the argument's been made that I've already advocated for passage of this conditional use permit. My thought in communications that I had in emails with Mr. Rolbecky and others was that I was advocating for us to look at it again, but until now, I didn't think I was advocating for its actual passage. At the first meeting, as you know, 2 of us were gone, myself and Mr. Granlund. And the historic nature of the building, the position of the Randall Park Historic Neighborhood on the issue contributed to my feeling that we should look at it again, and in fact that 2 of us were gone. So at this point, though, I do agree. I liked the earlier drawing better. This one. I like that drawing better. That said, I do have confidence that the plans that this family says they have for the building will be carried out. And to that point, I want to mention or address concerns that I've heard about the fact that this would be a tavern instead of a restaurant, and we have so many taverns on Water Street already and so on. As you know, I retired from the police department, and for several years I was in charge of the Central District, which included the Water Street area. So it was my job to deal with the crime and disorder that was taking place down in Water Street. So in that regard, I looked at resources available to law enforcement for that purpose. And one of them is out of the Center for Problem-Oriented Policing at the University of Wisconsin, which is a resource used by police departments across the country. And in that, in their information, what they find is that concentration of bars can be a contributing factor, but what they say is that the mere fact that the neighborhood has a concentration of bars does not necessarily mean there will be higher crime in the area. The factors that are more likely to contribute to crime and disorder in and around that bar is the atmosphere inside the bar. The more seating you have, the less competitive nature of the events that take place inside the bar. 2-for-1 drink specials, or whatever drink specials you might want to put on it, have an effect. When the atmosphere attracts is targeted toward young males, and most of us here have been that, so we know what we're talking about, then it's more likely that confrontations, binge drinking will occur inside that bar. And we have some bars like that in the 300 and 400 blocks of Water Street. But this is not in the Water Street Business District. It's outside of that. It's not part of that plan that is addressing the problems that we've had with bars in that area. This business plan, to me, looks much more like the Firehouse, although even the Firehouse doesn't serve prepared food other than, pizza. But when you look at what that bar was in the past, the Diamond Lounge and Fat Boys, I spent a lot of time in those bars, wondering if I was going to come out uninjured, actually. So, but the atmosphere that is in that tavern now is what makes the difference between the Diamond Lounge, Fat Boys, and the Firehouse. This is much more like Ray's Place, which does serve prepared food and is known for their menu. So, and I do also understand the concern about when the property changes hands. We don't want it to become some of the kinds of bars that become problems for the neighborhoods, and I agree with that as well. But I understand we have the opportunity to put conditions on the conditional use permit that would be able to prevent that from happening no matter who owns the bar. The hours of operation, the fact that they serve prepared foods, perhaps even some requirements when it comes to seating. So if I was there discussing with my colleagues, I might be willing to support amendments that fit the plan that he's already told us he wants to do. Amendments to the conditional use permit that could prevent that loss of the type of business we're looking for there. So at this point, I do advocate for passage, and I would support amendments if I had the opportunity. Thank you.
Any questions for Commissioner? Mr. Larson, I guess, right? Thanks for coming up.
Yep.
Anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
Good evening. Lisa Giese, Health Department Director. First of all, thank you for taking the time, both the owner and the commission for taking time to really consider this carefully. A restaurant is possible in this location as you originally approved. Health Department staff have worked with the owner to look at that, to look at what is possible in order to construct a restaurant that also serves alcohol. Our environmental staff did spend time on site doing that. It perhaps is not a business model that is going to work for the owner because of sales. And so I just want to make sure that you understand that it is probably a business decision, but not a decision that a restaurant is not possible. Parking is not an issue if it's a restaurant. The capacity of the space is not an issue as a restaurant. And as you originally approved it, a restaurant selling alcohol is a possibility in that site. Certainly the floor plan that was presented and the indication that 75 to 85 individuals that would be needed in order to have an operation that is going to make ends meet certainly implies that it's not a place for sitting and eating along with a drink. Data tells us, as I spoke to you earlier, that binge drinking is a significant issue in this community. Eau Claire has higher rates of binge drinking than the state as a whole, and the state has higher rates of binge drinking than the nation. We have a significant problem in Eau Claire. It's not just the college kids. That data comes from all of us as adults in this room, unfortunately. It's not a college kid problem. Certainly college kids also binge drink. An alcohol establishment, alcohol being served at an establishment where that's the focus, that's the business model, which is what's been presented to you today, is different than alcohol being served at an establishment where food is the priority and is the business model. One of the top 3 health priorities in the community coming from community residents is alcohol misuse, unsafe alcohol use. I'm also the mother of 4 teenagers, which you may not all know, but I would bring my children to an establishment that would serve alcohol if I had a place to sit, a place to eat some good food, and a place where I might also have a glass of wine there. Certainly what was shared as far as a floor plan and the business model for this is really about standing and drinking. Again, hopefully with some good food as well and a wonderful historic building, but certainly it wouldn't be the focus. Policy decisions that you do make a difference in the health of our community. I think this is a place where considering the focus, again, a focus, a priority on food with alcohol being served versus a focus on alcohol where food will be served, sets a different tone. Thank you.
Any questions? Thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Good evening.
I'm Chad Hoyard. I'm the Deputy Chief with the Eau Claire Police Department. A lot of good points were placed tonight, and was initially hesitant about it being a tavern, and I'm just not convinced yet that all the things are in place. One of my concerns is that talked about the density within the bar. If the seating isn't in place, one of the things that they talk about in problem-oriented policing, and they hit on really hard, is that if you're elbow to elbow and there's not places for people to sit, people get irritated and it creates problems. And that's where a lot of the disorder happens within the taverns, is when people do not have places to sit. The other thing is that if food is not a high priority within an establishment, alcohol will be the main thing served. And with people close to each other and bumping into each other and consuming alcohol more than food, it becomes a problem. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about, or just touch base on for you to consider, is that one of the concerns that I have is that it seems like the plan continues to change as it goes. And I don't know if he has any experience at this point. It would be nice to have somebody come in that has been running a tavern so we know exactly what are the plans and what they're going to do. But this one is an unknown. And it has nothing to do with the applicant. It's just that a person's going into this new and going into a specific area where we have a lot of alcohol issues. And so I think that becomes a challenge for us. And the other one is to comment on you know, they talked about this is away from the other taverns, and so they don't see that it's going to be an issue in the community. We got to keep in mind that there's going to be a facility probably built down by the university. The university is going to build a facility more down towards Menominee Street. And so that is going to bring a lot of the college kids from that area walking to that establishment. And then when they come back, this will be an opportunity for the ones that are of age to stop, drink, and they will be filtering back into the community the other direction. How much? I don't know. But that's one thing that we got to consider. The other thing is that we're looking at a possible YMCA going in there. And we will have young kids going to that area and in that area. And is that what we want as a community, to have another tavern where these young kids are around? So those are things that I would just like you to consider as you make your decisions on this.
Any questions? Appreciate you coming up.
Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
I would just like to have the opportunity to address both the health department and the police department. I will start with the health department. This platform right here, it addresses the questions that Mr. Peterson asked me. I didn't want to change this platform, but to the health department's point about parking issues, there are parking issues here. With this platform, this requires me to have 27 parking spots. I only have a lease agreement with the city for 20. So that's not accurate, and I understand that that's not their division to understand, but that is an issue. That's a big issue here. So I'm not going to beat that point, but if I do this platform, I like this platform. It lays out a lot better. It's much more family friendly. But now I'm accounted to those four tops, and my parking changes dramatically. I want you to understand that point. Second, the police department, as far as my experience within the bar tavern industry, I have about 10 years of experience from working from taverns to a country club to being my last experience was a service manager / bar manager at the Green Mill in Eau Claire. So I fully understand what I'm getting myself into. And the second point about the plan keeps changing, you're absolutely right, the plan keeps changing. I have a historic building that I'm trying to preserve here. I mean, there's no perfect way. The perfect way for me to go and do everything that's being asked of me is to start from scratch and knock the building down. And that's a reality. So why that plan keeps changing is because we're going back to what I started 18 months ago with the Landmarks Committee of making this building work. So it's probably going to change once or twice based on what you're asking me to do. I'm going to have to accommodate those. So it will change, and if we preserve this building, it's going to have to. I think that's just something that I ask you folks to wrap your head around. I mean, we can address all the issues that you're asking me to. It's just a clean slate. I mean, I've bounced this off of the architects. I've got the professional help. I mean, it's a lot easier. That was their recommendation to me. Start from scratch. Start new. So that being said, that's the reason I didn't want to change this. I was just told that in order to make the parking change that I needed to give you this option.
Any questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Seymour.
Daryl, could you maybe clarify what is going on with the parking issue? I keep getting confused.
The parking requirement for a tavern versus a restaurant, it's the same. It's based on seating capacity, or, which is one stall per 3 seats, or one stall per 100 square feet, whichever is more. With this floor plan, the more is the one stall per 100 square feet. With the other floor plan, you count out the seats, it's the seating capacity that's establishing the parking requirement.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Daryl, doesn't the applicant already have an agreement with the city for extra parking? Didn't we send him off to get an agreement that would provide 20 stalls for the 80
He has an
seat
agreement with the city for 20 stalls. He has a 3-stall reduction from his 27 stall requirement to 24. He has to make up 4 stalls somewhere on his site or some other site to get the 4 additional stalls for the restaurant floor plan, which was the other floor plan that he showed you.
And now that it's changed to a tavern, does the city agreement with the city still hold?
The agreement is an agreement for this facility. It is not specific to a tavern or to a restaurant.
Then I guess I don't understand what the parking problem is. Referenced.
Based on that floor plan, he needs 4 additional stalls somewhere. And we've indicated a willingness to work with him. He's got a curb cut on 10th. It would involve cost of paving a parking lot to do it in that location. There might be other options.
I do want to add to your question, Kathy, of one of the requests put on by the Historic Committee was that I do not use any of the green space on the building as parking. So even though that the city will work with me, they asked me as one of their provisions that I do not utilize any of that space.
Mr. Peterson.
The tables that are there, they're showing 4 chairs per table.
Mm-hmm.
Daryl, if they were the tall tables where people stood at them and didn't have seats, those don't require parking, and yet you can get the same number of people in there?
We could interpret it that way if there was an actual seats. It was just a standing, yes, we could interpret it that way.
Okay.
I think one last point that I have to address too is as I told you in my first presentation, my focus is family and the police department being concerned about a YMCA potentially coming in. I've got Hobbs, which has got just as many children coming out of it from the different user groups, if it's figure skating, if it's hockey, if it's Parks and Rec stuff going on there. I feel like that's a moot point. Children are already there. I'm not looking to have people flying out of a parking lot that have had too much to drink and harm children. That's already addressed in my business plan.
Mr. Seymour.
James, could you maybe make us feel a little more comfortable with food being a high priority in your business?
I think the best way I can answer that question to you is the reason that I'm asking for the conditional use permit is, let's just put it all on the table. A Dooley's, a Mogi's that operates as a restaurant. I guess I've asked the question of who's monitoring how much food and liquor and beer that's coming out of there. Who's monitoring that? And I think the best way for me to answer that question to you is, as my uncle spoke of, I'm trying to operate as a restaurant and make this work, but I also don't want to be in a position where I can't control what my patrons come in and what they want. I can control by my management style of who I'm making this an intriguing place to. But at the end of the day, if that split comes out to 60-40, more beer than food, I guess I'm being honest with the city and saying I'm not trying to, just let this one slip by. I'm just saying I don't want to be in a position where I'm defending that, because that could be a possibility. I'm going to do everything possible to offer a food environment that is a little more upscale, that is a little more appealing to the health conscious things that are going on around me. But I can't open this place and say I'm going to have 70% food. And I think that is something that you folks should wrap your head around. I'm being honest. I'm saying, you know what? It might be 50-50, but it's going to be 50-50 and it's going to be done right. Thank you.
To clarify, as far as who's monitoring, and I think several people have spoken in that regard, the physical building itself, the layout of the building, the tables, the chairs, where the tables and chairs are laid out, all help monitor that. I mean, obviously, if there's enough tables for people to sit down and eat, they're going to eat. If there are no tables for people to sit down and eat, then they're not. If it's gonna break up large groups of people standing and gathering around, and make it so that people can walk through and not get bumped into, and drinks get spilt, whatever might happen, where all of a sudden it turns into something more. I mean, all those things, just a simple chair and a stool will change. And I think for us to understand what you want to do, and I think what we want to see in there is that plan. And if it means it's a tavern, but it's that plan, great. But if it's the other plan, then that to us is more than a family-friendly experience. And we'll, I mean, and I can speak with 25 years of experience, and I've seen it and I've lived it and I've been a part of it. And I think that really it is important that to build what you want to build, based on what your family is saying, what you're saying, and what you're showing to us, it needs to be, in my mind, more along that line, that plan right there that's, on our screen, to do all the things that the community and the city wants to see. So just to answer the question, it can be monitored, not just by a 60-40 split, but by the physical layout of the building as well. Does that make sense?
I think you're answering the question from a drawing perspective to make you guys feel better about it, but I'm asking the question, who's monitoring that? Who's keeping track of that? I mean, it's an easy thing to track off of a business sales, how much is liquor and food.
Sure, and I guess I'm not sure. Again, having been in the business, no one's ever come in and looked at my books, but I think they can come in and see that there are tables and chairs and stools, and Mogies and Doolies will say the same thing. There are tables and chairs for people to sit down at. So that to me, and with a kitchen and a menu and prepared foods, all those things are going to be obvious enough to either the city or to us or the community that it is a restaurant and a bar together. Walking into an empty room with no tables, no chairs, doesn't appear to be a restaurant or a place that serves food. It appears to be a place where people stand around and drink, or I understand they're going to eat, but it's not just a drawing, it's actually the physical part of the building. And what controls it? What monitors it?
Well, Terry, I mean, you guys had the same drawing back on July 5th. You had the same drawing on July 5th.
Right.
There was no. I mean, I just told you I'd like to use this drawing, and you've heard why it is. Those issues weren't brought up then. Now they're being brought up now. So I think Mr. Larson hit it on the head that I think we need to take a hybrid of these two and gel them and make you feel comfortable with that. And I think that can be done by an amendment. I mean, I've told you there's ways that I can put this booth seating in to accommodate what you're asking, and you're asking me to make you feel better about it, and I'm saying I'm willing to do it.
Okay. Any other questions? I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
My name is Jody Thompson, 707 6th Avenue. When I've spoken at council, they don't, if I ask a question, they don't answer it. Is it permitted for me to ask a question first and get an actual answer before I share my views?
A question to us or a question to the
Or the applicant? Is it known what back when he wanted to demolish the building, is it known what the purpose would have been? I don't know what that would have been.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the question.
He originally wanted to demolish the building. Do we know what he would have then done with the property after demolition? Was it for a restaurant? Was it for a larger bar? Do we know? An office space, an apartment? Do we know?
Sure.
Can you answer that? I don't think that was covered in the news, and I was wondering.
I mean, To answer your question, I would say that I would have to, without being able to put plans in front of an architect and get approved through the planning, the city planning, I mean, the general development was commercial. I mean, it wasn't specifically that it was going to be a restaurant or a bar. It was going to be developed into commercial.
Okay, so you don't have plans to do a bar, period? You don't have you didn't originally have your heart set on having a bar?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for indulging that. A lot of comments have been made, and I would like to address them because I feel they really impact my life. I'm in my 11th year in Randall Park. I do feel that it's somewhat politically incorrect to speak very frankly about what it's like to live there. I am at extreme odds with the viewpoint expressed by the neighborhood association. I was shocked at the endorsement of yet another bar, and I was even more shocked to actually look at the packet and see that not only did they endorse another bar, but they went so far as to say that they would become regular customers, and I feel that's really overstepping. I do feel that too often the neighborhood association advocates for businesses, various government bodies and landlords, and not necessarily renters or homeowners. I don't participate. The next commenter I'd like to sort of rebut is Mr. Gregert's email. I understand that his information has been verified as correct, but if you look at that 2009 agreement, which I did, that's sort of cherry picking. He took one section, and it also hasn't been, and that was carried forward as sort of a pro-argument. It wasn't noted then in the packet that that dividing line goes right down the middle of the street, where on the one side of the street, which is a property owned by, I believe, the gentleman here, and is not in the 2009 business district plan, the other side of the street, which I believe is also owned by his family, is. And so this few feet dividing line down the middle of the street is this big, oh, well, we can just throw it out the window. But in that same business plan, it also calls for avoiding piecemeal, which I think conditional use permits can be very piecemeal kind of zoning and use. It also does talk numerous times as to the comprehensive plans. The health chapter, which Mr. Greger also did work on, which has called for all kinds of policy changes to address our substance abuse problems, which are only getting worse. They've gotten worse in the 11 years since I've lived here, specifically since the economic downturn. It seemed like there was a period there where there was a little bit less enrollment, and a lot of other people started coming in that were non-students. It hasn't been all good. We talk about, we'd like to see children in that neighborhood. I've seen children in my neighborhood, and it's very unfortunate circumstances. I've seen child abuse and neglect. I've seen pet abuse and neglect. I've lived next to frankly, it was obviously a meth house, which has finally been cleared out. With squatters, it was a deep impact on my quality of life. I could go on and on about that sort of thing. I'm very grateful for what both the police representative and the health department have said, especially the first time when they spoke a little bit more strongly. I didn't understand why those two testimonies were not included in your packet. I felt that the packet sort of skewed towards a yes. There are all kinds of, in the past I've tried to have all sorts of chapter and verse, quote this source, that source, and it doesn't seem like that does a lot of good, but there is a University of Wisconsin Department on Alcohol Research or something, and it specifically says that there's a lot of data that availability, access, number of bars, it does matter, and this is a whole Eau Claire situation. And I'm probably going to assassinate how you pronounce his name, Mr. Robecky has tried to take on himself our culture in this town, and he can't do that. He can't do that. Wisconsin state law has it so that the municipal bodies, you guys and the council itself, are in control of our alcohol policy. And when it's an abstracted situation and we're working on like a comprehensive plan, or we're making statements to the press, we need policy changes. And when we're faced with an individual who's probably established in the community, a liked person, it goes out the window. We now have we have 2 brew pubs near a bridge on the side of the river. We know that that's not a good situation. We have the council has recently approved alcohol included in movie theaters, in art classes, in yoga classes. It's been a very inclusive situation the last few years with alcohol policy, not decreasing alcohol policy. And I don't know how long till we're asked not to participate in the sculpture tour anymore because they get trashed. I don't know at what point are we going to have the political will to start saying no and address the alcohol policy, which is you guys and council and nobody else. Nobody else. I originally was disturbed when I heard that he wanted to demolish that building. Watching this progress, I have done a 360. If a bar is the best we can do, and I pick up beer bottles way down on 6th and Lake, and that's way far away from all kinds of bars. Changing the culture at all and really getting behind the task force that's going to be supposedly revitalizing the neighborhood, all of that stuff, that's going to mean strong policy changes and saying no to more bars. So I have now completely reversed myself. Let him tear that thing down. No more bars. If that's the best we can do, no more bars. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming up. Is there anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item?
I just wanted to say one more thing, that I was at the neighborhood meeting. Again, it wasn't my neighborhood, but I was in support of James Obecki. And the reason they said they would frequent this place is because James kept saying he was going to preserve the historic integrity of the building. This is the kind of place, and there's a lot of us that aren't college age. I'm going to be 60 years old this next year, and I do not binge drink, but I do like to go out and have a cocktail once in a while, and it sounds like it's a perfect fit for that building. And I just want to stress that I do think that there's a whole different purpose that he's looking at for the building, and I think that's important. So I just want to mention that.
Great. Thanks for coming up. Anyone else here?
If she can rebut, then I can rebut. So often these policies are not set by people who live with them. And that is a real tragedy. We have a couple of people who live in the Randall Park neighborhood who are, vocal, but for the most part, decisions are made by people who live in better neighborhoods. A lot of times they are people who are investors or landlords or property owners or influential people who live on the lake in Altoona, down in the town of Pleasant Valley, and they have a lot of clout. And they set policy that people like me have to live with. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item? Again, I'll ask if there's anyone else here that wishes to speak to this agenda item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing portion of the meeting. Looking for a motion to approve the conditional use permit for a tavern at 1004 Menominee Street.
Also move.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Commissioner Ebert.
I'd like to say what I think, because I've kind of stayed quiet listening to what people have said. I lived in the Randall Park neighborhood area for 9 years at the corner of 9th and Menominee, and it was a neighborhood where if you wanted to eat anything, you could go to Ray's, or you could buy a 6-pack of beer there. but the people that went to Ray's were not the same people who were down on Water Street. And I was part of the Landmarks Commission committee that originally met with Roll Bianchi's to try and find a reuse for this building. With the building of the new center at the university, we thought this was a really good fit for that, because there is something close by where people can stop by and have a sandwich before they go dispersed from that area. And I kind of wonder if we couldn't find 4 parking spots in the parking lot that's going to be built, or if that's not allowed. The other thing is that I see this bar as a destination or a starting point, and I will use the comparison. Kids that are on Water Street drinking are not really likely at 11 o'clock or midnight to say, oh, let's walk to Corton House, because it's too far. If they're gonna go there, they're gonna take a car, and I see this the same way. It's 6 blocks away from the closest bar if you take away Ray's and the VFW, which have a different clientele, and I don't see that we're gonna have a lot of spillover. Where you see a lot of beer bottles and stuff scattered around the neighborhood is the house parties that happen, and I know the police department devotes a great deal of time to trying to keep those under control, but I think they're still very popular, especially in the fall and the spring. I think this is a good fit for the neighborhood, and I plan to support it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Radebaugh.
Yeah, I guess I agreed with Jenny last time, and I agree with her again this time. I think a little of the confusion with all the plans changing and this and that, and some of the comments tonight from James is he's probably well over his budget on planning, and at some point he's got to get this before he starts spending more money. So I guess it sounds to me he's frustrated with the planning process and all the steps he's gone through, and at this point he's saying, give me my approval, then I'll get the plan and finalize all the details. But I think Jenny's right on with it's a different location, even though it's on the same piece of asphalt.
Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you. Well, I certainly have sympathy for the applicant and the frustration of dealing with the historic structure and now this, but and I'm sorry for all that's happened, but I can't overlook the fact that we are looking at a conditional use permit. That's our responsibility, and that permit goes with the building. And so if at some time this building is sold, then it stays as a tavern. And we can put some conditions on it, but I don't personally think that we can condition it sufficiently to make me comfortable with having a tavern in this location. And if we look at the ordinance, the conditional use ordinance, I would say it was my opinion that this conditional use would be materially detrimental to the public health and general welfare. I think that the uses, value, and enjoyment of other property in the neighborhood will be diminished by this conditional use, and I cannot support it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Seymour.
Thank you. I think every person who's spoken tonight has made excellent points about this matter. And I was one of the people that voted against this the last time around. And at that point, I was probably 51-49 against it. I think now I can say that I could support this, and I will support it.
Any other comments? Commissioner Peterson.
In that, and Daryl, correct me if I'm wrong, if this were to be a restaurant that serves liquor, there's no requirement that 5 years from now they would have to be 90% food and 10% liquor. They could be 90% beer and liquor and 10% food as a restaurant, could they not?
One of the criteria or definitions of a restaurant is that its primary sales is food.
Okay, so it would have to be 51%.
Correct.
But a tavern that serves food could be 51% liquor or alcohol and 49% food.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other comments? Commissioner Mitchell? Commissioner Mitchell?
Well, I'm trying to get an idea of how this is going to go, because if it's going to pass, I want to make some amendments to the conditions. So what should I do? Mr. Chairman.
You know, I guess that was going to be a question for me, is if there's an opportunity here for us to at least give us some comfort today and in the future, then maybe this is the time that we work on that. So if there are going to be suggestions for amendments, you know, what would they be, and what would best suit everyone's concerns here? I think we want to see the building stay. I really do. I think we want to see a business be successful there, and we want to see it there, you know, for a long, long time. But I think if there's things that we can do now to make sure of that, then I think it's worth discussing.
I'm open to amendments.
Okay.
Okay, well, my first amendment would be that that we add a condition such that this facility must serve food such that it is required to be licensed by the health department. If I get a second, I'll explain that.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So it comes down to the definition of food. And I'm not well versed in that as far as the state and all goes, but I do know that if we were to add this, then a new owner couldn't just sell popcorn. And so this would require some kind of food other than popcorn and peanuts, is what I gather from the health department. So that would be my first amendment.
Can I clarify, is it a frozen pizza, put it in a pizza oven, is that?
As I understand it, yeah.
Is what?
Is food, would be still required to be licensed.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I guess my question is more along the lines, you're fine with it, they just serve a frozen pizza out of a pizza oven and nothing else? Okay. Okay, so any other suggestions?
Well, do you want to vote on this first?
Or can we, well, sure, let's do it that way then. All right, so we have a motion and we have a second, and we've had some discussion. Any other discussion in regards to the requirement of it being approved by the health department?
So we're just voting on the amendment.
Correct, this is just the amendment. Any other discussion though? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, amendment is approved. Any other suggestions? Commissioner Mitchell.
Well, my second amendment would be that the conditions include the hours of operation as given in Mr. Rolbecki's email, but without the word roughly. So in other words, the hours would be Monday through Thursday from 11 to 12:30 a.m., Friday and Saturday from 11 to 1:30 a.m., and Sunday from 9 to midnight, if I've got that correct. But those would be the hours as a condition of the permit.
Thoughts?
Can you second?
No, I'm sorry. Yep, motion in a second. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion.
Kathy, are you looking at the closing time as opposed to the opening time? Could they open at 10 instead of 11?
I'm just reading what he gave us.
Yep. But are you more concerned with the closing time than you are the opening time?
Yeah.
So would you want to limit it to the closing time as opposed to the opening? Because if he's serving food, if a hockey tournament is starting at 11, he's not going to want to open at 11. He's going to want to open at 10.
Well, I don't want to tell him what his hours ought to be. I'm just saying what he gave us. so.
Okay, but do you want, if you're after more limiting the closing time to address maybe alcohol abuse, do you want to be more lenient on the opening time and just pin down the closing times, no later than? You see what I'm after?
Commissioner Seymour.
Could we have James speak to this matter, because it really wasn't discussed during
Can we wait 1 minute though?
during the meeting? I mean, we haven't talked about it.
I guess if I could weigh in one, I think if we focus on, I mean, the state has already set closing hours, and I think, we get back to policing, did they close at 12:30, and did they close at 1, and did they?
This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Plan Commission. This program was recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.